Sometimes people don't see that, and it's really trying to shine a light on this is what we do and understand that. And that's probably the biggest challenge, is for people to understand that anything that we do actually follows a process.
Welcome to Process Pioneers, the show that takes a deep dive into the minds of decision makers, key influencers, and process experts who are pioneering the world of everything process.
Welcome to another episode of Process Pioneers. My name is Daniel Rayner. I'm the host of Process Pioneers. And in each of these episodes, I get the privilege of sitting down with different people in different organizations that have something to do with business process management. So understanding, documenting, improving business processes, whatever it might be. It's with people that are day in, day out working on business processes. We're not talking about theory here. We're talking with people that are putting business processes into practice and getting real value for their organizations. And today I have the absolute pleasure of sitting down with Freya Franklin, who is a process improvement specialist at the Port Waratah Coal Services. Freya, thanks for joining me.
Hi, how are you?
Doing very well, thanks. So what we might do to kick off is I'll pass the ball to you. And that was obviously a very brief introduction, but if you can take us back to where, I guess, your interest in process was first peaked, or where it was first introduced to you, and then take us on a journey leading up to the work that you're doing today.
Sure, I won't go back too far. Could go back to my childhood, but I won't. So I studied mechanical and manufacturing engineering at uni, and through the manufacturing component of that was really about processes and how do you manufacture something from having a widget at the start to then producing something at the end. So that was probably where it all began for me, and to understand that. And then from there, I went into an automotive industry. And that's where it really became fundamental and front of mind to understand how we process different things, how we get those widgets to these different shapes, which then formed a motor car that everyone drives around today. So that was the key thing for me, was the why and the how.
Yes, that's great. And when an organization is looking at, understanding their business processes, because not every organization has that emphasis or that focus. But what is one of the biggest challenges or mistakes that you see an organization make in trying to understand what's actually going on?
Yeah, I think it's a real challenge depending on the industry you're in. So if you look at a manufacturing industry, it's really easy to see because I know I've said it a couple of times already, but you start with a product that you convert into another product. But you can use that in every industry. So whether it's financial documents for a bank or different industries, they still have a process to follow. And it could be that they get a piece of paper that then has to go to someone else that they have to sign, then staple it. It goes to someone else who takes out the staple because they can't feed it through a machine to do a fax machine or something, or scan it. And then it goes, so that everyone follows a process. I guess it's sometimes people don't see that. And it's really trying to shine the light on this is what we do and understand that. And that's probably the biggest challenge, is for people to understand that anything that we do actually follows a process. I mean, we woke up this morning, you and and I don't know what you did this morning, but I know I had to organise some kids to get to school, worry about a dog, make lunches, have my own breakfast. So I'm following a process myself, just in my own personal life.
True.
So you just convert that into something that produces a profit or a good quality outcome. And that is a process that you follow at work.
Yes, that's great. And I think it's, you mentioned something there about that, passing that document, taking that staple out. Like within a process, there can be such fine detail there that is naturally done. And that can be also improved. Process improvement doesn't necessarily have to be radical innovation, although that can be quite spectacular. And we've seen that happen over the last 10, 15, 20 years, where you have these startup companies, the Ubers, the Airbnbs, the ones that come into entire industries, and they're like, we understand what's currently being done and how value is currently being delivered, but we think we have a totally new way of delivering value. But then looking at the example that you mentioned there, you could have, a very minor task that takes place tens of thousands of times a day. And if you can just improve that one task, even just 1 second or half a second, that's a lot of savings there.
Yeah, absolutely. And And it's about what the process should do and what it's actually happening. So that's where the business process management, all the tools that you can use to map it out, demonstrates what should happen and what is actually happening. And then you can tell the difference between the two and say, well, hang on, that's not what should happen, so we have to work on that. Or hang on, the guys are doing it better, so that should be the normal standard process. Right. Or it does identify those things of such as putting a staple in and it has to be removed again. Well, hang on, that's just a silly process that is obviously working for some teams, but not the responding customer team. So let's try and work out a way that just simplifies both those processes. Yes, or actions that are part of that process. Yeah. So it's what should happen and what actually does happen is probably the biggest thing and the biggest win that you can work with organizations on, because you have a lot of people going, oh, it should do this. It's, well, hang on, what does it actually do? And that's where you have to work with the people who operate in that process to determine what is actually happening.
Yes. And when you do bring those people together, because I know that you run workshops, facilitate workshops where you've got different key people, stakeholders, the process practitioners, you bring them into the one place to try and understand, well, what is actually going on here? Do you find that there is often a common understanding of what takes place, or do you find that sometimes different people will have a different understanding of what is actually going on? And then how do you manage that? How do you actually find out, well, what is the truth?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because it really depends. So some you get massive variations, and particularly where I'm currently working, we've got multiple shifts that rotate. So you've got multiple stakeholders that carry out the same process, but team A will do it differently to team B. Team C does it a slightly different way, and then team D can do it a completely different way. So until you work with all the people who actually run that process, then you don't understand it. But you can look at it from an equipment perspective as well, is that it should follow this process from an equipment perspective. And then for some reason, the equipment operates in a different way than what you believe it should operate. So there's the equipment side of it, but it's the people side that you can probably get more benefit from, because you get that consultation directly with them. You work with them. They can actually come up with the greater ideas. And sometimes what they're doing, like I said earlier, could be better than what everyone thinks it should happen. If you then document that and share it, then people understand what's supposed to happen and what does happen, and then you can improve on that. And if you have any faults, you can easily fault find where it's going wrong as well.
Yes, that's really important. I think I had one interview a week or so ago where they were talking about the organization they worked in and how the CEO he operated from a very process-centric lens or process management style. And every time someone came to him and presented a problem, the first question he would ask them is, show me, what's the process? Show me the process. If you have a problem, bring me the process, then we'll be able to find the solution.
Yeah, absolutely. And some processes, or most processes, if you document them, you can come to a solution or an improvement or fault find what needs to be. The challenge is working with those people to document it in a way that makes sense to them, because you can get engineers. I'm an engineer that can use your engineering terminology to someone who says, can you just put it in simple plain English for me to understand? So that's the key too, is making sure you have the right language that people understand, and make sure that they're part of it. So they actually help roll out or determine what that process is, or write it down, so that they understand when they're stepping outside their process and what the risks are if they do step outside that process. Yes. Otherwise, a process could just be a process. It's, there's got to be risks if you're not following the right process. So, for example, if I didn't make the kids' lunches today, the risk is that they'll go hungry. I know that's a very simple process change, but from a business perspective, you've got safety and environmental issues to really deal with, and also an operational fallout. So you could actually underperform or overperform, which can sometimes be just as bad if you step outside that process.
Yes, that's right. And it reminds me of another conversation I had just yesterday, where someone was talking about, I think it was NASA or a team that worked with NASA, and the process was followed, I believe, in building this particular spaceship or whatever it was. But but the right quality checks weren't carried out or performed, and it ended up being millions of dollars worth of loss because the space rocket shut off when it was still 10 meters or 20 meters above the ground. So it obviously fell through, and all of this money was lost. So it's really important, you know, not to just to follow the process, or have a process, but make sure that people are actually following that.
Yeah, and if they're not, understand why they're not.
Right.
So that's critical too, because sometimes people can put processes onto people, so to speak, and say, you must follow this process. But if they don't understand the whys, or if they variate from that, you should understand why they variate from that, because that could mean that the process that they have been provided with or are supposed to be following is not right for various reasons. So that's where that consultation and real commitment and communication with those people who need to follow that process is paramount.
Yes, yeah. And I guess having that atmosphere or that environment or that culture that encourages and fosters sharing improvement ideas and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it takes time. So I guess that's one of the challenges too with organisations, is to understand that mapping these processes does take time. And if you're in an organisation that has multiple teams, obviously you need to consult with those teams, and that takes time. But the result is so much better if you take the time to do it properly, rather than just rushing to a solution, because the process or the mapping of it will demonstrate that if you move lever A in the process, or make a change in the front end, it could impact the other end, and vice versa. So it tells you where those impacts could be seen throughout the process, rather than just rushing and doing something and then 10 days later you go, oh my gosh, that was the worst change we could ever do.
Yes.
Well, we didn't process map it properly and understand the process to understand what the output is from that change.
Right. That's great. And now talking about wins, I guess specific wins from a process improvement. And I've heard many different examples and stories of, you know, an organization where they took one small process, maybe it was a critical process, and they tweaked one thing, and they either saw time savings or cost savings or revenue generation. But is there one example that comes to your mind where in whatever organization it is that they carried out a process improvement and it delivered significant value to the organization?
Yeah, well, that's my job. That's what I do all the time. So I've probably got more than one example, but I'll try and pick one that's a simplistic one. And it's probably, like I said, it's easier in a manufacturing organisation to pick one. But if it's okay, I might share a couple.
Yeah, go for it.
From a manufacturing organisation, we had steel coming into a press line that then was formed into a panel that then went on a motor vehicle at the end of the day.
Right.
Now, this was a robotic line. So the robotic is moved at a particular way to pick up the panel as it traverses through the press line. Now, it runs at a particular rate, and you get paid through your budget of how many parts you make per hour. So it's a rate per hour kind of thing. Now, we could have just gone ahead and just kept making a loss, and not from a loss only from a budget perspective, but also the time spent to produce these parts was taking X time, which meant over a period of days and weeks, you're then going to be rushing to try and get the parts out in the right amount of time. Right. They accumulate because it's not just one part going through the same line. So we addressed all the parts, all the components that go through this line, and looked at just modifying little bits with the automation to make that robot move just a little bit earlier. So not faster, because by speed you can create issues, but just making them the time for them to move a little bit earlier, and it was safe to do so. And we reduced the rates dramatically over that line, which then reduced the pressure, and we could spend the right time doing the right things, i.e. looking at the quality of the panels and making sure that we planned the next line properly, rather than just trying to rush to get them through and end up with, bad budget and also bad operational produce at the end of the time, at the end of the day. So that was one really easy one, but it's still being able to understand the process and where you can just tweak it a little bit to be smarter. And that's a key word. It's to be smarter. You don't have to be faster. You just have to be smarter with what you do.
Yes.
We had a similar thing here whereby we had some spillage occurring, which, you know, when you're processing coal, you sometimes get spillage. And it was, well, again, how do we work smarter so that we reduce the impact to our operational team who has to then clean up the spillage because it's not on the belts where it should be.
Right.
So we mapped out the process and followed the process and learnt which levers we could slightly move, still produce the right rate for a customer, but reduce the amount of impact to the operational team who had to basically spend their time cleaning up when they could be doing other more value adding jobs.
Yes, right.
So there's that from a financial aspect too. You can look at it from mapping out the process of carrying out a financial or a commercial agreement with someone. And I won't go obviously into the confidential part of that. But again, knowing the steps and saying, well, hang on, you're manually entering that data 3 times over. Why don't we just do a little Excel? And it could just be an Excel. You don't have to have a whiz-bang IT solution to just say, well, let's just look that up in that chart and automatically populate it. And then that saves that risk of getting it wrong, which could mean that you might be charging people the wrong amount of money or not getting the right amount of money in, kind of thing. So there are always little improvements. You don't have to need the latest technological solutions for a lot of improvements. It can be what the guys who do the work, they are usually the ones who will generate the ideas, and they're the ones that you just sort of test behind the scenes with data to say, yes, that will do, or actually, if we're just going to modify yours a little bit, but keep them along the line and on the journey as well, and they will then find more and more as you keep moving forward.
That's great. And I'd imagine that by doing that, by bringing them along for the journey, that really helps to, I guess, squash any fear of people losing their jobs. Because I think that, you know, in other organizations, that is a fear that I have heard a number of times, that why do you want to understand what I'm doing? Like, is there any need to? Like, I've done the same thing for the last 5, 10, 15 years. Why do you want to understand it now? Are you going to automate it? Am I going to lose my job? So I think, as you're saying, bringing them along for the journey and empowering them to identify the issues and the pain points and the problems, and then also empowering them to come up with potential solutions does a big part in making them feel involved and take ownership of that.
Absolutely. So there's been no change that I've been part of when there's not that fear. And it doesn't matter what organisation you're in, where that's fear of, you're going to be taking my job away if you help me improve this. Well, no, it's just making you work smarter so that you can do something else that you should be doing and you're not feeling so panicked and rushed about doing it. And it can be anybody in any role can have that fear. And like, you know, we both discussed it, that if you keep them part of that, then they'll see the rewards and go, oh my gosh, I'm actually much more relaxed. I can get this done. I'm not nervous about making that manual entry. I can check it and I can still verify it, but I'm not going to be the one who accidentally puts a 5 when it should be a 7 or something like that.
Yes.
So that's when they get peace of mind as well. And you're right, that's when it then turns into a more positive spin. And the unfortunate thing is you can then have many ideas coming through, which isn't unfortunate, but you have to prioritize and work out which ones you need to work on first. But that's where a lot of businesses should move into. And that would be the desirable move forward for businesses.
Yeah, great. Now we've talked about, you know, bringing people along for the journey, the people that are conducting the processes and the process practitioners and making sure that we have buy-in from them. There'd be people listening right now, or when we release the episode, that will be from organizations that maybe process improvement or management, it hasn't been adopted from the organization because it hasn't been adopted by the executive team at this point. So how do you go about, or do you have any suggestions or ideas about how do you go about getting buy-in from or sponsorship from the executive team? What do they want to hear? What do they need to hear? How do you get them on your side, so to speak?
So it is a lot easier if you have support from the higher areas of the business. If you don't, and I've come across this in my years where you have a change of stakeholders and change of people in the senior management. I find the easiest way to do that is to work with the teams that are willing to give it a go and come up and find a solution and implement it and prove that it works and have it on paper and say, this is what the outcome has delivered, whether it's a 4-minute improvement, which relates to X number of dollars, or whether it's we've reduced the amount of time, as in to carry out, or manual entries, which has reduced the risk by this amount. You need to have those proven facts, so to speak, or those proven, and they could be the low-hanging fruit, but that will help show that there is a need for this and a desire for this, and then that will then flow up. And if you've got the everyone sort of in the lower levels of the business wanting to do it, I think, maths by conception, or doing it as a maths will change the output, and you will see beneficially that you get a higher morale rate as well, because people are happier, they get more job satisfaction, and you're getting better outputs for the overall business.
Yes.
It's a tough one though, trying to convince the hire.
Yeah, but I think, like, as you're saying, if you can show that value and prove it in one particular area, and it brings another conversation to mind. I was talking to someone that the organization hadn't adopted business process management. This guy was brought in to be on a project, a small project, and he thought, well, I know that BPM works and improving your processes works, so I'm going to implement it in this project because I know it's going to be valuable here, whether the organization's doing it or not. And then after he proved that value, the business unit took notice and were like, hey, that project went really well. And they really kicked some major goals there. And because of the way they ran the project or understood the processes that were happening. And so the business unit adopted BPM, and then the department adopted it. And then before they knew it, the executive team took notice and were like, wow, this department's thriving. Why? What are you guys doing? But putting it business process management into place, and then they said, right, we want to do this organization wide because it's bringing so much value here. We want to try and untap value in other areas as well.
Yeah, excellent. And there's also that that value that's hidden. I call it the hidden value, where you have a lot of people who are going to leave the business, and they take so much knowledge with them. And they're the key stakeholders that know how processes work in whatever role they have. So if you don't have that business processing management set in place, then you're going to lose that skill when that person decides to leave the business, whether it, hopefully for retirement, for other reasons. So if you don't have that, then you're almost having to start from scratch for your business, which is a lot harder. So if you've got the mindset and can show that it's valuable, not only from an improvement, but also just understanding, and then you can build from that's critical as well. It's that lost value that you don't realize until it's too late.
Yes. Now, when that person does approach their executive team about, hey, this could bring a lot of value to our organization. Maybe they have done it on a small scale. They're like, look at the value that we're seeing here. What are some of the objections that someone may face when presenting BPM, and not just to the executive team, but also to the process practitioners, the frontline employees?
Yeah, so the biggest ones that I've seen in the past is, we don't have time for you to do that. We just want you to come up with a solution. Or, I know what the solution is. Can you just go and implement it?
Right.
And I said, well, hang on. If you don't allow me to take the time to actually map it out and work out what we are doing, not should be doing, but what we are doing, then I can't see how we can make a change. Plus, if you want me to rush about and put a solution in place, then that could actually jeopardize the other part of the process. So, and actually create more risks to the business than what you're trying to solve. So it's a hard one. And I guess you've just got to have those constant conversations with them and finally get their acceptance that you've got to allow me 3 weeks to do this rather than 3 hours. And you can determine whether it's 3 hours, 3 weeks. And then again, you've just got to kind of prove to them that you've gone about it the right way. And I've had one in my past life where this has happened, and I've taken the time to do it, and their solution would have really completely screwed up the entire process.
Right.
So whilst I didn't rub it in their face, it was I just had to explain that had we done that, this would have been the result. So can we just change slightly your solution to this one, and then you can actually display it. So it's, again, you've got to somehow get that low-hanging fruit done and be able to also get them to accept that you need the time to do it and show that it does actually work in the end.
Yes, yeah, that's great. And now looking to the future of process management, and obviously every organization is at a different level of BPM maturity and will require different things. But if we're looking over the next 2, 3, 5 years, what do you see, what do you see organizations doing in terms of BPM or the trends, or where organizations should be putting their focus into?
Yeah, so I think there's a real need. You only have to look outside businesses with what's happening with Australia and the world. And I'm not going to go into the political landscape there, but you look at China, for example, and what we're facing in 2020 with pandemics and stuff. If we don't do that process or the business process management to then be able to find solutions and create improvements, then I don't know what Australia is going to be like in the future. So we've got to start now. We've got to start doing that to be able to improve and respond quickly to change in markets. So if I'm going to say China, if China blocks out that they can't take any more from us and we can't purchase from them, then we have to rely on external other parties or our own country for that supply. So we have to change rapidly. Yes. To be able to do that, you need those fundamentals inserted and in place to be able to respond quickly. Otherwise, you're going to spend all this time trying to work out whether you can. And by that stage, it's too late and you won't be able to function in the future. So that's where I think we need to move. And it's got to be, the business has to want to do it, but see the need. And I think that need has become quite evident in the last 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of organizations this year has experienced what changing rapidly looks like.
Yeah.
And, how have we normally done this process, and what do we need to change to now? And I've heard stories of, different organizations where they were one day had tens of thousands of people working in city centers, office spaces, call centers, whatever it may be. And then the day after, everyone's working from home, but they had their processes in place and they were able to make that transition so rapidly. And then there are obviously those cases which people probably aren't shouting these ones from the rooftop, but where because of the turbulent nature of the year, it's like putting out fires, trying to, how do we adapt? How do we pivot? How do we change what we've done? Because the world's a different place now.
Yeah, and also from a weather perspective, you look at organisations that work outside and your farmers and the likes, they can't determine what the weather's going to be like. They have to change rapidly. And I guess farmers have learnt over the years to be able to do that, and they have set processes, I'm sure, within their farming community of what needs to be done. Businesses external to farmers sometimes don't see that and don't realise that, and that's critical as well, just with what's moving forward in that space as well.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And now for someone listening to our conversation and they're learning, maybe this is the first time they're learning about business process management. They've heard about the idea of what understanding and improving processes looks like. They're learning about the value here, but where should they go now? Where can they learn more about business process management? The internet can be a scary place because there's so much out there and it can be quite overwhelming. Who do you trust and what's appropriate or applicable to me and my organization? So what would you recommend for someone that wants to learn more?
Oh, yeah, I know you put this question down and I found this one tricky to answer because I've never been in a position to actually have to find it out for myself.
Right.
I've had it throughout my whole life kind of thing, and some people just have it intuitively.
Right.
Or that's my thought anyway. You
yes.
sometimes just have that creative mind that goes down that path. Yes, the internet is a scary place, but I believe it is somewhere that you should start. It is a wealth of knowledge. But don't be afraid to pick up that phone call and make that first conversation with someone and ask the questions of where do I go to get this or how do I get that? There's a lot of TAFE things out there too, which feature your continuous improvement or your lean tools, which focus on your business process management as well. So you can go down that path, and there's organisations that specialise in that. It's not going to just come to you. There are some books you can read, but it depends how you like to learn as well. You can read books, but then having to actually put it in place, that's where sometimes doing it with organisations that provide that, or through your teaching or your learning through schools, etc., allows you to trial that out and test it and actually formulate the answer to the problems you have.
Yeah, I think it is a big mindset thing. I think for some people it does come naturally, and I have heard that quite a lot in a number of different interviews where they didn't have any formal qualification in process management or process improvement. It was just the way they naturally thought about things. They naturally identified problems and they naturally thought about, well, how can we improve this? And then before they knew it, that got recognized, and the manager was like, you're now the process design lead or the process improvement specialist. Or so I think it is, very much a mindset for some people at least. But Freya, I just want to thank you for sitting down with me today. Obviously, we can only scrape the surface on a few different topics, but I'm sure that the audience that will be listening to this, they're going to glean a lot from our conversation. And the whole goal idea of this podcast is to spark ideas and to spark conversation. And, if someone can just take one golden nugget from our conversation today, then that's, I see that as an absolute win. So, guys that are listening, if you do want to learn more, if you have enjoyed the conversation with Freya today, by all means, but add something into the comment section on YouTube or LinkedIn or wherever you're listening to this. Put your questions forth. I'm sure Freya wouldn't mind if you connect with her on LinkedIn as well, if you did ask her any questions. But Freya, thanks for sitting down with me and having this chat today.
No worries. Thank you, Daniel. It's been fun.